everybody. So I'm back with Monograph Mondays, and I'm here to share with you a book that I have spent a lot of time with because it says just wrote 5,000 words on it. But it is Heart of the Race by Stella Dazzi, Susan Scafee, and Beverly Bryan. It was published in 1985, won the Martin Luther King Award that year. So it's kind of a classic in Black British feminism. It's definitely a classic in Black British feminism. But I think it's a really important book if you want to gain insight on what Blackness means in another Western context. So, and I also think most importantly, this book is super, super, super accessible. Like, I enjoyed reading it. It's like a perfect book. It's not written in, pretentious academic jargon, but it's still very intellectually stimulating, which I tend to draw towards books that are able to do that. But yeah, it's a really awesome book, and I'm going to tell you some things that I feel like you can get from it. I think the first thing is you can understand what it means to be Black in another Western context. I think not here in the States, because I'm here in the UK, but in the States, there's a shared experience, and this is, at me if you want to. I think there's like a shared experience of what it means to be Black. And that's me coming from I feel like being African American, our narrative is very mainstream in comparison to other diasporas. So maybe someone who's from the States, who's Jamaican or Trinidadian, may say that they don't feel like their Blackness is prioritized. So that might be from a place of privilege for myself. But I feel like I always felt like there was a shared identity of what it means to be Black. Here in the UK, there is a shared identity of what it means to be Black, but it's much more complex and it's much more inclusive because of the nature of migration. So, for example, Blackness encompasses the Asian experience. But when I say Asian, most people would think, if you're listening from the States, you would think, okay, the Chinese or the Japanese. But that's not who I'm referring to. I'm speaking more about like people from Bangladesh, like Pakistan, like that Asian experience. So that's really important when accessing the book. And in saying that, how do we address the issues in the issues in collective movements? I think this book, in specifically looking at Blackness in the UK, I think it's really interesting because it almost feels like they were trying to, or the question becomes, how do we manifest the Pan-African dream? And to me, the Pan-African dream is that we all get together at some point. Like all of the oppressed to get together and we band together and we just like mess everything up and we're all like empowered and excited again. And that's been something that's a dream that's been going on for centuries, but whether or not it's actually feasible is a whole other issue. But I think this book gets at some of the realistic problems when collectivizing in that way. A lot of people say, okay, well, all Black people just need to get together and come together and be and fight and everyone's going to be heard. And that's not necessarily what happens when people, and I know that many feminist scholars have commented on the issues when collectivizing a movement. And I feel like this book kind of articulates that using their particular struggles. So I think that's what you'll get from the book. In addition to just understanding a different diaspora, most of the women in the Black British women's movement, who I feel, not most of the women, but I feel like a lot of attention, at least from what I spent my time on, was from Caribbean women from the West Indies and the Caribbean coming to the UK. And understanding their specific struggles, because the US and the UK are not necessarily comparable in the issues that we face. So that is Heart of the Race. Oh, last bit that I think is really important that I want some people to comment on, which is there's around 5 chapters. Each of them cover issues. So they kind of talk about the history of their movement in the first chapter. Then they get into the issues that they had while organizing their movement, and they were sending out newsletters. They were creating and setting up conferences. They were protesting. So they were very active in the movement. So they talk about the issues they had, issues that they had. They talk about their identities and how they accessed, law, education, and health, all those issues, how it particularly affected Black women. But the first chapter I think is really important, which I want to draw your attention to, which is they tell the history of slavery, but they almost encompass everyone in that history, and the whole chapter is written in first person, which to me got me thinking, how do we as members of how do Black people access the past? And how does time operate? Sadly, a lot of the issues that they cover in the book are still happening here. Like for teachers, the idea of sin bins, which is basically areas that they would just send students who weren't listening in class, highly racialized as one would expect, kind of sending students to the idea of sin bins. That's something that happens in the States, like the idea of sending a student out of your classroom that you don't have to teach anymore. That stuff is still going on. So in many ways, the impact of this book and the impact of their movement and the work that they've done is still yet to be realized. But I think it's really important to kind of think about, does that blur time? Are Black people in many ways much more connected to the past than others because of our feeling of being erased from it? I don't know. That's just a thought. How do you see yourself accessing the past? How do you access the past? Do you see yourself as being very close to the past, very distant? I want to hear your thoughts. And if you want me to explain more, we can talk more in the comments. I'm trying to keep this to under 7.5 minutes, and I'm getting there. So, Heart of the Race, Stella Dazzi, really, really accessible. Definitely recommend you getting it. It's not that expensive. It was just re-released about, I want to say, 5 years ago, because it was the 30th year anniversary. So definitely check it out, and check me out on Friday. I'm going to be talking about some Afrofuturism, and check me out next Monday for Monograph Mondays, and I will see you guys later. Bye.